Hello, all the nerds out there. I hope you all are doing fine. And guess what? Today we are going to talk about romantic criticism. So, guys, are you ready? Well, I'm pretty ready. So, let's begin. The first thing we are going to do the introduction to romantic criticism, what this actually is, and also we'll talk about the characteristics of romanticism, and then we'll move on to early romantics or and also we'll move to late romantics and of course major romantic critics. So all of this we're going to cover in this particular session, so I hope you all are ready for that. So let's begin. So picture this. It's the late 18th century and writers are fed up with the whole new classical scene. They want something fresh, something new in their literature. And you can guess what happened. British romanticism is born. Now, what's the deal with romanticism? You might be wondering, right? Well, it's all about breaking free from the idea that literature has to be all about beauty, nobility, and perfection. So these romantics, they're a kind of rebels. They're all about emotion, imagination, and a deep connection to nature. They're saying something like that. Hey, let's forget about those new classical rules and get in touch with our own feelings. So, but this romantic movement didn't just pop out of thin air, like I said. It was influenced by a European movement called Sturm and Drang. You should remember, and that translates to storm and stress. So these guys were all about passion and individualism, and that energy definitely rubbed off on our British romantics. Now, another major thing happened was the French Revolution, and it was like a shot of adrenaline for these folks. And it got their creative juice flowing. They saw it as a call to arms against oppression and chance for real change. So they're saying something like that. Hey, it's time for individuals to step up and take responsibility. Forget about old traditions. And as you know, there are two key players in the romantic scene, and they were Schlegel brothers, Friedrich and August Wilhelm. You might have heard about them. If not, then I'll tell you about this in our next slide. They laid some of the groundwork for this whole movement, and in the 1790s, romantic poetry started taking off like a rocket. It was all about expressing personal feelings and emotions through the power of words. So in the English corner, we have got some heavy vets like William Blake, William Wordsworth, and S.T. Coleridge. So these guys are like the founding fathers of English romanticism. But the party didn't stop there. We have got more stars like P.B. Shelley, John Keats, and of course our Lord Byron. Right. One of the key moments in this movement was the publication of lyrical ballads, and this collection of poems by Wordsworth and Coleridge basically launched the Romantic movement. It was all about celebrating the ordinary and finding beauty in everyday life. But let's not forget about our European friends. Like there is this German dude named Novalis who wrote a piece called Hymns to the Night, which is all about that dreamy, mysterious vibe. And then there is this Scottish poet Robert Burns that you all guys should know about, who's known for his heartfelt and down to earth poetry. And of course, we can't skip over Rousseau, right? And his philosophy, and of course, his philosophical writings were like the Bible for the Romantics. And he championed the idea of getting back to nature and living a simple, authentic life. And last but not least, we have got Walt Whitman, that American rebel, right? And his poem Song of Myself is like a love letter to individualism and the human spirit. Then we have S.T. Coleridge poetry, which is all about the supernatural and the power of the imagination. Now let's talk about the characteristics of romanticism in literature. This is the slide here, and this particular movement is kind of passionately glorifies the wonder of nature. Imagine poets and authors immersing themselves in the beauty of meadows, forests, and rivers, celebrating the magnificence of the natural world. It is a literary love affair with the great outdoors, where nature takes center stage as a source of inspiration and awe. And one of the hallmark feature of the romanticism is its emphasis on the power of emotions. In this particularly literary realm, it's perfectly acceptable to wear your heart on your sleeves, to let feelings run deep and intense. So the romantics encourages us to be aware of our emotions, to embrace them and to express them freely through our words. Romantic literature isn't just about kings and queens or epic or adventure. It shines a light on the lives of ordinary people and the magic of childhood. It's a celebration of the common person's experiences and the innocent wonder of youth. And these writers find beauty and inspiration in the everyday. In the world of romanticism, the senses are on overdrive, emotions are heightened, and feelings are depicted in vivid, larger than life ways. It's a literary style that doesn't hold back, where words and imagery evoke powerful sensation and resonate deeply within the reader. So, imagination takes center stage in romantic works. It's like a superpower that fuels creativity and allows writers to conjure up fantastical world and ideas. The romantics encourages us to let us, our imagination run wild and explore the boundless realm of our own creativity. Artistic freedom is celebrated in romantic literature. Whether you're a painter, writer, musician, or any kind of artist, this movement is your biggest cheerleader. It's all about embracing and expressing your unique creative vision. Again, another important characteristic is the aesthetic beauty, which is highly prized in romanticism. It's a celebration of the visually stunning and aesthetically pleasing. Think of it as a relentless pursuit of all things beautiful and captivating. Solitude is a central theme in romantic works, and it's time for self reflection, introspection, and of course, connecting with one's inner thoughts and emotion. And the romantics understand the value of being alone with one's thoughts and feelings. Again, romantic writers are in awe of nature's grandeur and power. They view nature as an incredible force that can inspire, humble, and provoke deep contemplation. Nature isn't just a backdrop, it's a source of profound wonder and beauty. Another important characteristic is the individuality, and that takes the spotlight in romantic literature as well. It's a celebration of the unique, the personal, and the individual perspective. That means your thoughts, your experience, and identity are a kind of cherished and explored. Romanticism often venture into exotic settings, and remember that kind of historical periods, offering readers kind of thrilling adventure through time and place. It's a journey into the unknown, a chance to explore the mystery of history and culture. One of the most important characteristic is the supernatural, and the spiritual find their place in romantic works, adding an element of mysticism and wonder. It's where the boundaries of reality blur and readers are transported into the realm of the extraordinary. In romantic literature, words come alive with vivid sensory description. You'll find yourself immersed in scenes that are richly detailed, evoking a sensory experiences that goes beyond words on a page. Again, many romantic writers engage in self expression, self exploration, often through autobiographical pieces. It's a deeply personal journey where the author's own experiences and emotions take center stage. Again, personification is a clever literary device often used in romantic work. It's the art of giving non human entities to human qualities and making objects, animals, or even nature itself come to life with human attributes. So, guys, that was all about the characteristics of romanticism. Let's quickly move to our early romantic critics, and you'll be wondering who will that be. Any guess? If you have, you can write in the comment box. But anyway, I'll take you there and I'll let you know who are these early romantics. First, we're going to talk about Rousseau. We have Jean-Jacques Rousseau, we have August Wilhelm Schlegel, Friedrich von Schiller, Wilhelm Friedrich Schlegel, Friedrich Wilhelm Schelling, and of course William Blake. These are the early romantic critics. And we'll start. The first one is August Wilhelm Schlegel. And who's this guy? So picture this, late 1700s, especially in Germany. We have got this August Wilhelm Schlegel, a guy who wore many hats. He's not only a poet but also translator and critic. And guess what? His brother Friedrich Schlegel was like the big boss of this movement called Jena Romanticism, and they were basically the trendsetter of their time. Now, August Wilhelm had a knack for languages, and he took the works of the famous playwright Shakespeare and translated them into German. And these translations made Shakespeare super popular in German literature. But that's not all. He also taught Sanskrit in Europe, and he even tackled the Bhagavad Gita in translation. In 1798 to 1800, he did something pretty cool. He started this magazine called the Athenaeum, and which was like the go-to source for all things about romanticism. And he was a bit of a critic too, and he didn't hold back. He took apart the works of this sentimental novelist named Auguste Lafontaine, giving him a big thumbs down. Schlegel wasn't just about words. In 1827, he gave some lectures on art and literature, and those became this book called On the Theory and the History of Plastic Arts. Important work that you should know. Anyway, I don't think you'll get questions from all these early romantic critics, but for your sake and for our understanding romantic criticism, that's why we have put them there. Anyway, if you don't want to listen all these things, you can just forward and start from Wordsworth. But anyway, I'll keep continue. And he had this journal called the Indische Bibliothek that ran from 1823 to 1830. He took on Latin translation of Bhagavad Gita in 1823 and tackled the Ramayana in 1829. In 1832, he wrote something called Reflections on the Study of Asiatic Language. So, yes, guys, this guy was pretty busy, and he was like a whole doing all kind of whole bunch of interesting stuff. Anyway, that was all about August Wilhelm Schlegel, and now we'll quickly move to another important figure, Friedrich von Schiller. And of course, he's again is a German, and of course he's buddy with John Wolfgang von Goethe. And these two German heavyweights were more than just friends. They were playwrights, poets, and deep thinkers, right? And now picture this: Goethe, already we know as a rock star in the literary scene, right? And that strikes up an intense friendship with Schiller. They didn't just chat about the weather, they got deep into discussion about all things aesthetics. What makes art beautiful and kind of stuff. They weren't just a couple of chatty philosophers. They teamed up to write a sassy poem called Zanian, and where they basically roasted their philosophical rivals. Now let's talk about letters on the aesthetic education of man, which is quite important in romantic criticism. And Schiller got all fired up by the French Revolution. But as time went on, he saw it, to take some ugly turns. And the whole liberty, equality, fraternity thing was great on paper. But in practice, it was a kind of bit mess. And Schiller famously said that a great movement had found a little people. So he poured his thought into these letters. He was on a mission to figure out what went wrong and how to stop such tragedies from happening again. Schiller believed that if we wanted political freedom, we needed to get our heads and hearts in sync. In Schiller's world, humans had two sides: the body, which was all about the senses and pleasure, and the mind, where our moral and ideal thoughts kind of hang out. And guess what? He thought art was the bridge that could bring these two sides together. So, in a nutshell, Schiller was all about using art aesthetics to help us find our way to political freedom, especially when we are born between our wild desires and, of course, our lofty ideals. Now, let's move to another important figure. The name kind of similar, I guess, that we have discussed. But anyway, this guy, Friedrich Wilhelm Schelling, was born in 1772, was basically a Swiss army knife of talents. He did all of it, and poetry, literary criticism, philosophy, and of course philology, which is like the study of language, and even dabbled in Indology, the study of Indian culture. His big brother, August Wilhelm Schlegel, was a big deal in the genre Romanticism, as we have discussed. And now here's the twist. Schlegel was a bit of a rebel in his younger years. He said no to religion, leaning toward atheism and individualism. Instead of hitting the books for law school, he was all about classical literature and university. And of course, Schlegel's career kicked off as a writer and lecturer, and he was the mastermind behind journal like Athenaeum. But again, he played a massive role in the Romantic movement, and his ideas inspired big names like Samuel Taylor Coleridge, Adam McVingie, and Casimir Brodinski, and that's kind of some serious influence, right? Another one is Friedrich Wilhelm Schelling, and this guy was born in 1775. You only have to remember the name. He was a German philosopher, and let me tell you, his philosophy was like a shapeshifter. It's so tricky to pin down because it kept evolving. And one of his work that it stand out is on the relation of the plastic arts to nature. It's a bit of puzzle to interpret, just like the man himself. So now let's talk about William Blake. And as we know, and everybody kind of aware of William Blake and his work, right? And why he's important in romantic criticism, because of the one work, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. So before we jump into that important work, first we'll talk about William Blake, who's the 18th century English poet, painter, and printmaker who left a huge mark on romantic poetry and art history. Now I know what you might be thinking. Who's this guy and why should we care? Well, let's find out. So first thing first, William Blake was very important guy. He didn't just write poetry, he painted and made prints too. And trust me, he was way ahead of his time. One thing that's super interesting about William Blake is that even though he's a big deal now, back in the day hardly anyone read his stuff. There is this critic named Northrop Frye who said Blake's prophetic works are some of the most underrated poetry in the English language. Imagine being a literary genius and not getting the recognition that you deserve. Well, guys, that's Blake for you. Now let's talk about some of his works. In 1803, Blake wrote a letter to a guy named Thomas Budd. Nothing too crazy there, but it's cool to see what he was up to in his personal life. In 1809, he came up with something called the descriptive catalogue. It was like a sneak peek or an advertisement for an exhibition he was planning. And guess what? It had some of Blake's own illustration, including ones for Chaucer's contemporary tales. So he was a kind of multi-talented. And we have put him here in the Romanticism because of the only work, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. Well, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, it was published during the French Revolution between 1719 and 1793. The title itself is a pretty iconic because it mentions, Emanuel Swedenborg's Heaven and Hell. But here's the interesting thing. It's not really about angels and demons, if you're thinking about. It's all about Blake's own personal beliefs, and it's pretty revolutionary. He even claims that John Milton, the guy who wrote Paradise Lost, was unknowingly on the side of devil. Can you believe it? And he thinks Milton Satan was actually a messiah. Most of the book is written in plain and old prose, except for the beginning part and a little something called the Song of Liberty. Blake takes us on a trip to hell, which sounds like it's a straight out of Dante's Divine Comedy, and of course Milton's Paradise Lost. And it's like a poetic adventure to the underworld. So guys, you only have to remember the name of the work, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, and of course you have to remember one important line from this, that the Milton was unknowingly on the side of the devil. So remember this particular stuff. Now let's talk about Jean-Jacques Rousseau. As we know, Rousseau is a philosopher, writer, political theorist, and of course he inspired French Revolution, Romantic generation, and of course he sparked new thinking called European Enlightenment. And of course, he revolutionized taste in arts, especially music. And of course, he helped in transform parenting and education approaches. And of course, advocated expression of emotions in relationship. And he had a big hands on cultivating religious sentiment, sense, and dogma. And he, of course, celebrated the beauty of nature. Again, some of the important points that here that you can note down, or anyway you will get the PPT in your app. Remember to download it. It's called Nerd School and you can find it in Play Store, App Store, anywhere. But anyway, his discourse on inequality and the social contract are cornerstone in his modern political and social thought. Rousseau's sentiment novel, that is important, Julie or the New Heloise, which was published in 1691, was important to the development of pre-romanticism and romanticism in fiction. Emile, which is quite important work, or on education 1762, is an educational treatise on the place of the individual in society. And Rousseau's autobiographical Confessions, which was composed in 1769, which initiated the modern autobiography. The last one, The Unfinished Reveries of the Solitary Walker, which was published around 1776 to 1778, exemplified the late 18th century age of sensibility. So that's all for today, guys. We have completed our early romantic critics. Now in our next session, we'll talk about major romantic critics who are like Wordsworth and S.T. College. So do not miss that particular session because I'm sure you might encounter a couple of questions from that session too. So guys, that's all for today and I'll see you in our next session. Bye bye and have a good day.